Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. Really appreciate you all joining us today and from wherever you are. I know for those of us on this session, we're over on the east side of the Atlantic, so I'm coming to you from the UK, and the speakers immediately after me are joining us from Berlin. So this is going to be a really interesting, sort of diverse session. Please make sure that as you have questions, you can put them right into the Q&A tab on the interface. And of course, you are more than welcome to chat away while we are talking, and I will field the questions at the end of the session. So this particular talk that I'm going to give is about integrating DAM and collections and the data from museum collections. The first museum I ever worked with was about 13, 14 years ago now, when I implemented or helped to implement a DAM at the British Museum. And the challenge was quite interesting to me because I had worked with a lot of product companies before that, where they had to integrate product data. And then all of a sudden, I had something that was very analogous to that, which was collections data. And so since then, having worked with numerous museums, I have faced this challenge as a consultant. And of course, my clients in the museum space have this challenge. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Talk a bit about collections management systems and what I think some of the best practices are for tying your digital assets to your collections data. To give you just a little bit of background about me, I've been part of the Henry Stewart community now for 12 or 13 years. I've been working in digital asset management for 16, almost 17 years, and more broadly in content management since 1995, when I started building websites and setting up databases for the early days of the commercial web. These are some of my recent clients over the last couple of years. Here in the UK, I work very avidly with the Art Fund, which is the largest UK charity for art, and I've worked on a number of projects with the Museum of London in recent years. So to talk about collections management systems first, in the museum world, of course, you might say a CMS. I have worked in the other kind of CMS for a very long time, which is, of course, content management systems more generally. But usually, of course, in museums, we talk about collections rather than just content management systems. So I thought I'd talk about some of the core functions of collections management and how those are really different and unique to what we get in a DAM, and also where there's overlap. And one of the questions might be, do you need both? And if so, what system should do what? And then I will go through some best practices for integration, as I've seen over the years working with a number of museums. And here we have the atrium of the British Museum, beautiful ceiling when you walk in. And hopefully you'll all be joining us again in London very soon, where we can hopefully be visiting all these museums in great numbers in the near future. So let's talk about collections management. What are the core functions of a CMS? Well, of course, the main thing is to manage pictures and records about the objects that are in the museum. And this is just an example from one called Gallery Systems. And wow, look at that. It looks a lot like a DAM, doesn't it? You've got pictures, you've got thumbnails. You can mouse over those thumbnails. You can get data. It's very similar, actually, to a DAM experience when you have a modern collections management system. And I think this is probably one of the core differences that we have between sort of the old CMS systems and the new ones, is that the new ones actually very much do look like digital asset management systems, and in some ways behave like digital assets management systems. So what does a collection management system really do? Well, they provide a number of things. First of all, inventory management. So what is in our museum? And also, where is it? So one of the core differences that I'll talk about is that collections management systems are not only just keeping track of what the object looks like, they're also keeping track of where it physically is, which is not something that that DAM systems tend to do. So if an object is in a particular room, the collections management system will manage that. If it's in storage, it will say not only what room of storage it's in, but maybe what shelf it's on and how that shelf is cataloged in terms of sort of the library type environment that object might be in. So Another purpose of the CMS is digital preservation, of course, of what's in the museum and other object-based collections that might be owned by the museum. And as I mentioned, this ability to track the physical location of the object, including when it's on loan. So if the Tate loans something to the Louvre, they know that that's where it is. It's also a starting point for what many museums call a sort of a collection explorer that's sometimes pushed to other platforms. So that might be things pushed to a dam. It might be things that are, of course, pushed to a giant online catalog or online experience for a museum. Something like the gentleman from the Vatican was just talking about getting all of the collection online and all of these images and all of the data that they're storing. That very often is in a collections management system before it ever gets into a dam. So sometimes when I'm contacted by a museum or an art, even an art gallery or something on a very small scale, they say, well, should I buy a dam or should I buy a CMS for what I'm doing? And of course, it really should come to use cases. What is the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish? So to manage physical objects and their location and to digitally preserve those objects, we usually look at a CMS. So here's an example of a web page from the Royal Academy here in London. And you can see there's a number of pieces of information about this particular Gin Lane it's actually from a work of art that's really meant to make people feel like gin is a dangerous thing. Me being a big gin fan, I'm a fan of this historical piece from Hogarth. And it's interesting because it's very satirical, of course, and it's showing how it's showing as if the British public was really just a bunch of drunkards drinking too much gin. And here, this is showing kind of taking the collections management to a more elevated level where we're not just managing a picture of the collection or a picture of the object, we're also starting to manage a story. So this is very similar to what we talk about in marketing technology, where the technology helps facilitate collections, it helps us put together a narrative, it helps curators, it helps people who are planning exhibitions to really put together a group of objects to really think about, well, what should be the narrative that we're telling as part of this exhibition? What should the stories say on the wall and on the different signs as someone moves through a particular exhibition? So it helps to manage stock as well. So if you're going to make prints of things, how are those sold? How are things co-signed in or out for exhibitions? And it might also include a customer relationship management aspect. So some museums, or I should say most museums, they have quite primitive CRM capabilities, but you might actually be creating collections in your CMS that have to do with particular types of customers. And if you know something about visitors to the museum, the history of your members, the types of art that they like, you can start to use your collections management system to bring together potential collections that would be relevant to them. So when we think about taking collections and digital collections to the next level, we have to think, beyond the object data is often the way I know museum professionals talk about it. So this is a typical screenshot when I go into a record of a collections management system where I have particular data about this object, the medium that it's created, it's silver and it's a photograph, the dimensions of the object, specifically where it is. This one is from the collection of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. The condition, you might want to describe, is it discolored? Is it faded? What kind of frame is it in? All of these extremely detailed pieces of information that are particularly relevant to a curator. Maybe if a curator is planning preservation of the physical object or cleaning of the physical object, they might get that information here in order to be able to plan these sorts of efforts that might be happening in a museum. So lots of data about the object itself. And this is a core difference between what you tend to find in the CMS versus what tends to go in a dam. So a good collections management system is really characterized by being able to catalog and cross-reference all these sort of necessary bits of data that are associated particularly with the object. So I mentioned some of these already: dimensions, advanced categorization, such as the type of work it is, acquisition details, who paid for it, where did we get it, was it from a private collection, what's the provenance of the object, and then conservation records, as I mentioned, what's the condition of it, what's the cost, what's the value, what's the insurance that we have on this particular object, and all of these things have to do with the physical. Now, when we get into DAM, it's really quite different in terms of the data that you tend to store about the object. But what I find is most interesting is that for every museum, it's slightly different in terms of what from the collections management system they want as data in the DAM. Some want something that's very bare bones. We just want to know the name of the object, and we want to know what it's about and maybe the description. Whereas some museums, they want a lot more of the object data in the DAM for one reason or another. So let's talk about that data overlap as well as the functional overlap. So some collections management providers also have a DAM. And there's been a few museums that I've worked with where they do work with the same vendor for both. And I have found in the UK, there's actually a couple of collections management vendors. You can imagine in the United Kingdom, we have lots of museums. And some of these providers have moved into the DAM world really within the last 2 to 3 years because they see the intense crossover between these two technologies. So you have to think about, well, should I do something that's pre-integrated or should I buy a completely separate platform for DAM? And frankly, it's not a black and white answer. You might, depending on your requirements, depending on your use case scenarios, you might not need a separate DAM. And these things are starting to happen more in platform environments than sort of out of the box product environments. So the majority of collections management software is now in the cloud. But of course, you're often seeing museums sort of a little bit hesitant to go into the cloud. I've recently had a discussion with a museum just about that, because sometimes it is more expensive to be in the cloud because of the volume of the assets, and also the size of the files can get very big. And many of these cloud systems, of course, are charging by terabyte. So that can be cost prohibitive. So getting the CMS right first, though, I believe is really essential before DAM implementation, because the collections management and the data about the name of the asset, the details about the asset should not originate in a DAM. And I think that's perhaps one of the most important takeaways here, is that you have to make sure that your data about your collection is clean, because you don't want anyone to have to re-enter it. You don't want anyone copying, pasting. You want to make sure that your data is right in the CMS before implementing a DAM. So some CMS systems, they also have web content management functionality to allow you to actually browse and use the CMS on the web rather than actually have to open an application on your computer. So that's obviously a good thing, because we want to do just about everything on our browser these days. And of course, many of them have very advanced taxonomy, multilingual support, and this can be used to drive online collection and allowing people to explore the collection virtually, even to license images and potentially reuse images in various ways for scholarly purposes or other reasons. So some don't have as much functionality, and they rely on another system to do that. So if you're wondering kind of how do I connect my DAM and my CMS, the first thing you have to understand is, what does your CMS really do? Is it just for managing bare bones data? Does it allow you to store high resolution images? Most don't, which is why the DAM might have to come in. Does it allow you to convert imagery and the sort of things that you expect from a DAM to maybe plan some workflows around campaigns, or to be able to create collections and collaborate with an agency that might be doing some planning for an exhibition? That's the sort of thing that CMSs don't tend to do, but DAMs do. So you need to plan for yourself. Where does the collections management system end and the DAM begin? And that's how you can determine how to let these systems overlap. So let's just take a few examples here. So if I have, for example, this object image management that I've talked about, you're not going to be able to, for example, store high resolution videos or manage media in rich ways within your CMS. You're going to have to think about different ways to do that in a DAM instead. So thinking about how much more media there is beyond the object related is part of the planning that you need to think about, and where that CMS has to stop. Thinking about web integration features, many collections management systems do actually integrate with web content management systems. So CMS to CMS, the two different CMSs. But the DAMs tend to have much better, definitely better APIs than your typical CMS. And that they tend to have more integrated or more sophisticated integration support than a CMS. And that's largely because DAMs are usually in environments where they have to be integrated, where CMSs have not historically been. Metadata and taxonomy support tends to be quite rich in both kinds of systems, both DAMs and CMSs, but you need to be careful about, as I mentioned, which is the system of record for object data versus the system of record for what you're going to use as a marketing asset or as a publishing asset. So you don't want the metadata to be writable or changeable in both systems. You need to have an authoritative source of object data, really should be the CMS, and then the authoritative source maybe for marketing information or other sort of rich content probably is in the DAM. And then there's the cloud situation. So you need to think about where are these systems being hosted, and will that complicate things? If you have one that's on premise and one in the cloud, and then of course the question of the strength of the APIs will also affect the integration capability. I see questions coming in there. I will take those at the end of the session after the second presentation, just so you know. So a couple of examples here. Here's a lovely picture from the National Gallery, where we have the toilette of Venus, and a lot of what we think about in DAM also is the context of where these images are, versus the CMS tends to really just think about the individual object itself. But here you can see we could imagine we could pull up all of the images that are in this particular room in the National Gallery, but there's often also legacy information that might just be relevant to the CMS that is not necessarily relevant to the DAM. So you don't usually have acquisition or loan information in the DAM, for example. You don't have financial information or insurance information in a DAM. So that's better partitioned within the CMS. Here's an example of what the object actually looks like in a catalog at the Art Fund, where one of my clients. And you can see here the details. Again, a lot of very rich metadata that isn't really the kind of thing you tend to import into a DAM for marketing and publishing purposes. But this is part of what you have to decide. There is not just one best practice of which data should necessarily be extracted and moved into the DAM, but it's something you need to decide. And as I mentioned, I'll say it again because it's really important, there needs to be only modifiable in one place. You don't want to not have that synchronization and read-write rules really strict. Otherwise, it gets very messy. And here is a DAM record of that same work of art. So you can see here there's less metadata, but there's also more that's a little bit more specific, potentially. That shouldn't have to be filled in this particular system. So all of this is actually imported from the object record, where you see the artist name, the region, the town where it is, the museum that it's in. None of that data has to be manually put in, because it's extracted, it's associated with this particular record. And you can see the user experience here is much more about the image, right? Whereas the user experience on the previous slide, when you're in a collections management system, is much more about the data. And you're not going to get the rich image management. You're not going to be able to do multiple conversions of your image, et cetera, in the CMS like you're going to be able to in the DAM. So think of, again, the DAM as a creative application. The CMS is much more a data management tool. Also can be very useful for archives, of course. Here's an example of corporate archives from Kohler, which is a company I'm sure many of you are familiar with. You can even use something that's very similar to a CMS to manage a corporate archive, which is very similar to a museum. So thinking about objects on display and thinking about how to connect that to the digital image is part of the decision you'll have to make if you're an archivist. should it be the same system? And this is a scenario where I often see there's not a separate system for the collection. Instead, they only use a DAM to do this, because with a corporate environment, you're not usually putting the you're not usually loaning out objects. You're not usually talking about the financial value of the work of art. It's much more about what's in the basement at the corporation, or what's offsite in some sort of preserved, temperature-controlled sort of building. So in this sort of situation, I often just see everything taken care of with a DAM, where they just have location data as a type of metadata, rather than having an entirely separate archival management solution. Okay, so last section, best practices for integration. So I think the most important best practice I've already said, which is get your data about your objects in order before you start putting a DAM in place in a museum. Because it really gets very sloppy if you try to create object data from scratch in your DAM, and then it's not synchronized with the physical collection. So in all these different scenarios here, you have to think about what data do I need to carry out this scenario, to manage my brand, to manage my campaigns, to produce the monthly magazine that the museum sends to its members, to generate educational programming. All of these things require object data, and it might just be 5 fields, it might just be 10 fields, but for each of the things you're trying to accomplish, be sure to define what's the object metadata I need in my DAM in order to run my campaign. What's the object metadata I need to run my online educational program for all these poor children that are stuck at home who can't come to the museum? And that's how you plan the integration. The collections management system pushes or hands off, or the DAM goes and picks it up. The APIs have to talk to each other to get the information that's required. So there's a lot of overlap, to conclude here and move on to our next speakers. There's a lot of overlap between collections management and DAM. And it's important to understand your use cases and make a decision about the balance between the two and stick to that decision. So be sure to make those decisions together with your key stakeholders, get an understanding of the organizational dynamics, and of course, the differing departmental requirements that you're going to have. And you need to determine, how am I going to aggregate the relevant object data for the different DAM users on the other end, who are putting together the exhibitions and the promotions and the marketing and the online, the online collection. And so it's not really, it's just as much art as it is science to really go through that and understand that, so you can plan appropriately. So CMSs aren't going anywhere, because DAM isn't going to take over completely from the CMS, but we really need to, of course, evolve from these offline catalog models to much more sophisticated cloud-based systems. And we need to connect them and plan these integrations well in advance, because it'll prevent a lot of unnecessary overlap and really poor data synchronization, which is what I see the big problem is with a lot of museums, with a lot of different corporations too. Okay, so that's it. Please, I see there's questions in. We're gonna hand off next to my co-presenters, to Cornelia and Norman, who are going to talk about the awesome project that they're doing in Berlin. Berlin is another place that I hope we'll all get back to really soon, because it's an absolutely awesome place for art. And they're going to share about their museum project, and then we'll take questions at the end. Norman, Cornelia, over to you.
So, I am from Berlin. I can say good evening or good afternoon to everybody. My name is Cornelia. I'm working for the Humboldt Forum Foundation for 5 years now, and I'm responsible for the documentation of objects and of digital assets, and therefore the DAM system and the collection management system are on my behalf. So, and the next to introduce is Norman.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. I'm Norman Mehler. I'm head of the digital department in the association, and I started 2.5 years ago as the head of the department, where Cornelia already was one of my employees. And our presentation connects very good to Theresa's, and as I can see, we did it the wrong way. You'll see in the next slides. So we start in the agenda with who we are, then where we started from, what our vision is, and then we go into the process we are doing at the moment and have a small conclusion in the end. So who are we? For everyone who doesn't know or just is curious to know something more, the Humboldt Forum in the center of Berlin, which is in the reconstructed Berlin Castle. Here's some images of our facade, which consists of an old reconstructed one and a modern one right next to the Berlin Dome in here. So who we are, the first one I said already, we are on the Museum Island where lots of museums are in Berlin, and the construction of the building began in 2012, and we just had a recent digital opening. Thanks to Corona, we couldn't open the doors for the visitors live, so we did a digital opening. Maybe one or two have seen that. It's still online on our website as far as I know. So there are 4 institutions in this complex Humboldt Forum, which go as partners together under the same roof. And you can see the institution in the lower part of the slide, like it's the Stiftung Humboldt Forum Berliner Schloss, the association we work for, the Staatliche Museen zu Berlin, the Federal Museum of Berlin, the Stiftung Stadtmuseum Berlin, and the Humboldt University of Berlin. So, but we are more than just a museum. The Humboldt Forum has got bigger goals like being a museum, part of university, event location, a forum for discussions and different views, and of course a digital platform. That's where we are for. So the association is the operator of the Humboldt Forum. We take care of combining all the things and needs of the partners in the Humboldt Forum. And as the digital department we work for is kind of an enabler for different things. We are enabling the museum part, like giving the platform for digital media, object and collection management, online collection and media guide, and some more things from the museum perspective. Then the events, digital media, of course, analog and digital advertisements, disposition, ticket sales, documentation of the events like photos and videos, hybrid formats, like being there and having a digital the digital part as well, and the forum giving this digital media the formats to have a forum where to discuss together, like in persona or maybe online platforms for the forum as well. And as you can see, the digital assets are essential in every part of the Humboldt Forum, every part of these strings. So let's begin in the beginning, where we started. As you can see, the first step of the construction on the left-hand side, and I'll hand over to Cornelia.
Yeah, as Norman already said, we started at the wrong end. Unlike probably most museums in the world, we didn't have any objects at the beginning. We didn't even have a museum. That was yet to be built. You have seen the pit, not even the pit, at the slide before Norman showed. And so we started with the digital assets. We had a lot of them, and in the last years, it was really important to handle it. And we handled this flood with a dam system, which was first. So in our museum, in our institution, we started with the dam. And there were 3 groups of digital assets of particular importance for this phase of constructing and reconstructing and building up a museum and planning. First were historical images, references used for like photographs, historical, or images, films, interviews, documents concerning the history of this very place where the Humboldt Forum was to be built and where the Berlin Palace used to stand. And this, historical images or archival material was very important as a template for the sculptures. You have seen at one of the first slides is Baroque facade, which is new, which is newly built. And here on the slide, we have an image of our, it's called Schlossbarhütte in German. It's a mason's lodge. It's where the sculptures work. And there's one of this most important uses of all these images we had in our dam. You can see on the left all these black and white photographs used by the sculptors when they worked on the elements of the facade. Next slide, please, Norman. The second, there's another nice image of one of our sculptures. The second group of images in our dam were photographs, images documenting the progress of the reconstruction from the pit on, doing the sculptures at the facade, and just building this whole Humboldt Forum up. So that's a second important group to document the progress of the building, of the reconstruction, and also documenting the work we did around it. Next slide, please, Norman. Because you also have to talk about what you do. And since this reconstruction took a while, as you have seen, the Berliners and maybe other guests in Berlin were really curious about what we do. And so the third part of assets in our dam was there to use for public relations. On the left, you can see it's one of our open door days where the public, maybe Berliners and others, could have a look inside the Schlüterhof, the courtyard built by Schlüter, and you can see one of the sculptures later on the portal. And at the right, you can see there were one of the events we organized in the last years, and there were lots of them, to show what we are doing, to show what we are planning. And of course, all these images were in this period and still are used by our colleagues from the marketing, from the public relations, and so on. But there were not only assets. Thank you, Norman. A few years ago, I could say now 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the first objects moved in. And that was a point where it was clear that we don't have to handle these digital assets. We don't have to handle only the images and videos and whatever we did in this time, but we need to handle the objects moving in. Parallel to the construction, the planning of the exhibitions at the Humboldt Forum has of course already begun. The Humboldt Forum Foundation, we are working for, hosts 3 permanent exhibitions showing the history of the site from the Middle Ages until now, very short. And we are hosting 1 to 2 special exhibitions every year. They are now waiting to be opened, I hope in spring. And there are further some, let's say, small introducing exhibitions organized together with our partner institution spread over the whole building. And another part where we need this collection management system for is a small own collection on the history of the site. And further, we want to show all our exhibits, our objects you can see at the building, also online in our online collection. So, and these are only the exhibitions and the objects we as the Humboldt Forum Foundation have to handle. There are about 20,000 objects the other partners under our roof will show. So our DAM had to grow with its tasks. Traditionally, we even use it for the object management and the organization of the exhibitions, thanks to the flexibility of our DAM. But we had reached the point that we really needed a specialized collection management system, which we purchased last year, and which is currently being set up and customized for our special purposes. And the special purpose mean we need our DAM, and we also need a specialized and really professional collection management system for our objects. So, and next slide, please, Norman. Because we have these objects now, we are organizing exhibitions, but these exhibitions are not only analog anymore. They are, as you probably know from your institutions, they are digital assets of all kinds as a self-evident part of exhibitions, of museums. They are media accompanying the objects in the exhibitions, as you can see here on the left picture. But they are also, yeah, let's say, completely digital exhibitions. So our example at the right is a video panorama showing 800 years of history of the site in 40 minutes. And this is one of the it's a really important exhibition part in our house. So if we talk about exhibitions and museums now, we do not talk anymore about one object and maybe one image, which is necessary in the collection management system to have just to know what you're talking about, or to print an image in your exhibition catalogs. But we speak about lots of images. We speak about more views of this object from all sides. We speak about films showing this object, interviews, for instance, with curators, or 3D animations also shown and used in this exhibition. Shortly, these assets, digital assets in the museum or an exhibition, contextualize the objects, and I think they meet the habits of this quite visual and digital age. And where we are at the moment, these digital assets need a DAM as well as a collection, as the objects need a collection management system. So we have the best, in our institution, we have the best of both worlds. Now on the next slide, please. We know that museum is no longer just analog. Their boundaries are fuzzy, they blur, and we know that for our digital exhibition, for our digital products, we need assets on the one side, but we also need the object information. And we have the digital assets, of course, in the DAM, and the object information in the collection management systems. And we have to combine them to make a good product. And of course, as we have learned in the last year, it's really necessary to have a specialized DAM and to have a specialized collection management system to work efficiently and to work sustainable. As Theresa said, it's I'm sorry, I stopped the sentence, I start a new sentence. Sometimes it's easier. So we do work with two softwares. We do work further with our DAM. We do work with our collection management system. And now we have we are at the point that we have to connect this two systems to really benefit from them. But I think, of course, there are collection management systems who can handle images, but we learned in the last year that to meet the requirements of the colleagues from marketing or public relations, it's really important to help them with the specialized software as a DAM can give. So I give back to Norman.
Thank you very much. So we go on to our vision. What do we want to have? We'd like to have one source system for every purpose, like media usage for collection objects, analog and digital ones, of course, exhibitions, media guide, collection online, displays, media installations, marketing, website, flyer, social media, poster, and so on, publications, presentations, and research. So what did we do? We're just going to grow a digital tree. We have the roots, which are the institutions in the Humboldt Forum, giving the information or big parts of the information into the trunk, which consists of different systems like the collections management system, the asset management, a ticketing system, event management system, and map and geo information backend. And all the data goes into our software we are building ourselves, which is a service hub, which is called Hallimasch, which is the German word for honey fungus. From there, the information go into all the branches of the tree and, of course, into the leaves, which are the output points like websites and flyers and the media tower you saw the slide before, newsletters, digital signage, and collections online, and so on and so on. How do we do that? What conclusions do we have? So we have in this image the systems, the core system zoomed in on the digital asset management, yellow on the left-hand side, the collection management system in green, and the service hub on the lower side. Every system has got their own has got their own data, who they should have authority to, as Theresa said earlier, like image metadata for the images, or copyright data for the images as well, or the media as well, and the exhibitions, object information in the collection management system. And it's not all about exchanging media. It's much more than that connects between the DAM and the collections management system we want to use to. There are lots of relations between the object and the media, as you can see here. We just pointed out the relations we have in our systems, and we want to connect between the systems, which is the hard part of the work we are in at the moment. So I can give back to Cornelia at the moment.
So how does this affect the data in practice? As you have seen, and yeah, as Theresa already has mentioned, it is absolutely necessary that it has to be clear which system has the authority for which data. You have to avoid redundancies. You have to avoid errors, and at work. So for some metadata, it's easy. You can distribute them to one or the other system, like the metadata of the digital assets, like who was the photographer, what's about the copyright, have we acquired or granted licenses on this. That's very clear. That's at home at the DAM system, as well as for the object metadata. Like what is it, who made it, what is it made from, the material, what is the inventory number, where is it at the moment, the location in our institution or in the exhibition. Therefore, it's also very clear that that's the authority of the collection management system. It's a little bit difficult, but not really when the rights are concerned. So it's clear as far as you talk about the, let's say, the copyright of the art of work, and then which is of course connected to the object and is at home at the collection management system. But if you talk about the copyright of the image of the artwork, then this is under the authority of the DAM. And I think that is one of the really important points to make yourself clear. What do we want to do in which system? Who will do that? And then you can try to divide it up. What Norman already mentioned and what's really important, but also really tricky, are the relations between or associations between objects and digital assets across the system boundaries. So you will always have an object mentioned in an interview, and the interview is an audio file, which is of course in a DAM system. And or the easiest thing you can imagine, you have one or more, mostly you have more images of this object, and these images are connected with rights and licenses and so forth, and they are also at home at the DAM system. A little bit is, yeah, one of our special requirements is also to use this connection between DAM system and collection management system to organize exhibition. And then we have the case that we have a media station, or how we call it. Yeah, I think you can call it media station in this exhibition, using different media from the DAM system. Like this is a station about a part of in the history, and we have different images, an interview and a film and so on. So, and of course, all this media at the DAM, and we try and we need to connect them to enable our colleagues from the exhibition department to work with both, to work with the objects which are physically on show, and but also to integrate media to their exhibition planning and the concepts of exhibition. And what Theresa also already has mentioned is, sorry?
I think we have to go on faster.
Okay. That's the next point, is that it's important to what we can see from which perspective. So then I am very short about this workflows, but so if you could have to divide this objects and digital assets to two systems, you also have to divide these workflows. One, of course, for specialized users in the DAM system, and the others for specialized as a registrar and the collection management system. At the moment, we had to adjust these workflows and to have to assign tasks to one or the other system. In this context, it's important to have a focus on the usability, because there are always users, some specialized users who are at home at both systems, have to do tasks for different purposes. And in this process, it's really necessary to involve the users and to really understand what are they doing and how can we help them. Yeah, Norman.
Thank you very much. So we just looked on how can we integrate, in the technical terms, the both systems. I've got 4 possibilities basis on our research. So the first one on the top one is having a completely integrated API between both systems, which would be the most sophisticated way of connecting between the connection between DAM and collections management system. But there are several other ways we can imagine, like having the DAM building a plugin for the other system to do this data exchange, or having the collection management system having a plugin to the DAM system, or at least the possibility we see very often is building a third-party software which is doing the connection between both systems and transferring the media data and the relations between the objects and metadata as well between the systems. So, back to Cornelia.
So that are the challenges at the moment. At the moment, it's challenging, but it's hard to say what are the biggest challenges. If you would ask me at the moment, I would say these 4 points. We have to understand and connect different data structures and different concepts of systems, and them on the other one side, and the collection management system at the other. They are there as they are, and they're not adjustable anyway, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. We have to consider, together with the vendors, predefined procedures of the system, and adapt them if necessary. That's a point which is, I think, is possible. We have to describe workflows precisely, and this challenge, and for us is especially, we have to do that as well. Although we don't already know them yet, we are just starting as a museum and starting with our exhibition. And the last one, it really needs agility and confidence, but we are sure at the moment, it's the only thing it's sure, that the requirements we see now, that they will change, which is fine, but we have to deal with that.
Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. So if you could,
this is the last
Norman,
slide now.
finish up. Perfect. Go ahead.
So our conclusion is we have to, the integration is a complex task, as we heard before, but we believe that it's worth it to integrate both systems, as well as these words are the pillars of the Humboldt Forum idea, like openness, accessibility, and interoperability. And we think we're not alone. Complete integration would be an important step for many museums. And of course, developing a subsequent use solution would be a big win for us and the vendors and other museums, of course. So thank you very much. If you've got any further questions, feel free to contact us.
Yes, please. Sorry, we can't take questions online, but please email Norman or Cornelia or myself, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks to both of you for your presentation, and thanks everybody for coming. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.